or maybe never believed everything they told us when they were getting elected. Often this was the truth. One of the big things that motivated me was in 2009, I was unhappy that many Republicans supported bailing out the banks. I don't think anybody's coming to Council Bluffs if your business goes under, if you're struggling, nobody's coming here to Council Bluffs to bail your business out. I don't think it made any sense to send billions and billions and even trillions of dollars to New York bankers. You know, if you lose your shirt in a business, if you lose and you go bankrupt and you were making $100 million a year, does it make any sense for that person not to miss a beat but to be making $100 million the next year with our bailout? And it doesn't make sense for the government to be involved with businesses. So I was unhappy about Republicans bailing out the banks, and that was sort of part of, I think, what some of this Tea Party movement was, is people unhappy actually with Republicans. But also unhappy that Republicans had made government bigger and debt bigger. The debt doubled under Republicans. Now it's completely out of control under Democrats. Under the Democrats and under President Obama, he will probably add more to the debt than all of the previous presidents combined. There are repercussions to this. We're borrowing about $1 million every minute right now. And so it is literally out of control. But you wonder about people inside the Beltway, inside Washington versus outside. And I'll give you an example. How many people here think it's a good idea to borrow money from China to send it to Pakistan?
Not a good idea.
We do this all the time. We don't have any money in Washington. We're out of money, and yet we are borrowing money from China to send it to Pakistan. So I got annoyed with it, and I decided I'd introduce an amendment. So I introduced an amendment, and it said that we shouldn't send any money to any country that persecutes or imprisons Christians. You would think, well, certainly everybody would be for that, right? If you poll that issue in Iowa, Council Bluffs, Nebraska, wherever you are, do you think we should send money to countries that persecute or imprison Christians? I would think nobody could be for that. I can't imagine anybody being for that. And yet we had the vote in the committee, and it was 18-2. Every Democrat and almost every Republican voted to continue this aid uninterrupted without any restrictions on it. And you say, well, what countries persecute Christians? Well, about 25 countries persecute Christians. They have law, typically Sharia law, that says if you marry someone of a different faith, you can be given life imprisonment or death. If you change your religion from Islam to Christianity, you can be given death or life imprisonment. Or if you say something about the religion, something critical that they consider to be blasphemy, you can be put to death. In fact, there was a woman by the name of Asia Bibi, and she went to draw water from a well in Pakistan. And as she was drawing water from a well, the women of the village began to stone her and beat her and chant death to the Christian. This went on. She was bloodied and beaten and drugged to the ground. And as she's crying out for help and the police finally come, she thinks she's being rescued. They arrest her and haul her off to jail because the other women of the village said that she had said something about, Islam. So this is the kind of stuff that your tax dollars, not even your tax dollars, we're having to borrow to send money to these countries, which is even worse. But it would be insult enough that your money is being sent to these other countries. And I've done this time and time again, and in Washington get no support, but among the public, I think, get a great deal of support. I thought when the Muslim Brotherhood was in charge of Egypt, we shouldn't send it. I thought when the generals took back over the coup, we shouldn't send the money to them either. We actually have a specific law that says if a country has an undemocratic change of government or a military coup, we're not allowed to send them. But you know what President Obama did, Hillary Clinton? They just redefined it and say, well, I guess it's not a coup. This is the new democratic government, even when they take over by force. With Israel, we have a unity government over there that includes Hamas. It won't renounce violence. It continues to have violence. We continue to send money to that group. And so I said, well, until they renounce violence, they shouldn't get anything. It's not even saying no money, which would probably be best. I'm saying unless they renounce violence, I can't get a vote on that either. But it shows you how out of touch these people are. But it also is, I think, the strongest argument for having term limits. We need to bring the whole mess of them home. The debate we're having within the Republican Party, though, is how do we grow big enough to win again? Iowa, President Obama won twice. There's 18 states that we haven't won in 30 years. So we've been increasingly behind the eight ball as far as winning elections. And so the debate has been within our party, should we dilute our message? Do we win by diluting our message and becoming more like the Democrats? Should we run a candidate that is just Democrat-like? Is that the way we're gonna win? And I frankly think that's the wrong approach. In fact, I think what we need to do is be boldly for what we were for. In fact, I think we need to be more boldly for what we were for. I grew up in the era of Ronald Reagan. When I was 13 years old, I went to the convention in Kansas City. It was one of the closest conventions in the last century. But Ronald Reagan was unequivocally for smaller government, less regulation, and lower taxes. One of the most dramatic things he did was lower the income tax from 70 to 50 and from 50 to 28 for the top rate. And we didn't whine about it and say, oh, woe is me, the Democrats are going to attack us, and say, oh, this will affect the rich more than the poor. Well, if you do basic math, it's always going to be that way. If we do a 1% tax cut, those who pay more, 1% is a bigger number of a bigger number, all right? 1% of a million is bigger than 1% of 10,000. It will always be that way. If we let the Democrats beat us up on this, and we just say, oh, the tax cut is about Warren Buffett. No, it's not. It's about Council Bluffs. It's about how much money you want to leave in Iowa. Would you rather have $50 million left in Iowa or $50 million sent to Washington? Do you really think you're getting your money's worth out of Washington? So what I would say, let's have that debate. Let's have that debate with the Democrats. Let's say, where are jobs better created? In Washington or in Iowa? Where's the money better spent? In Washington or in Iowa? I think it's an argument that we win hands down. We've been trying the other way for so long and it hasn't worked. We have a tax code that is so convoluted that some rich people and some rich corporations pay no taxes. All of us are beleaguered with the cost of paying our taxes, incredibly complicated. Half of us can't even figure out how to do it without hiring somebody to do it for us. The compliance costs are enormous. The Lord's Prayer is 66 words long. The Gettysburg Address is 266 words long. The Declaration of Independence is 1,322 words long. But the regulations for the sale of cabbage is 26,600 words. It's just gotten out of control. The tax code is 70,000 pages long. The tax code is said to be over 30 million words. So we looked at the tax code and we said, what can we do? Can we fix it? And we decided we ought to just scrap the whole thing and start over. Instead of a bunch of different rates, we replace it with one rate, 14.5% for personal income tax and 14.5% for the business tax. This is kind of like what Steve Forbes had talked about. Most people under 50,000 would still not pay any income tax, and that's the way it is with the current system. Very, very small income tax or any for under 50,000. But then we went one step further. We said we want this tax cut to also be about the working class, because we want the working class to feel like they're going to get more expendable income, either for saving for their kids, or for going on vacation, or for buying something that they need. So what we did is we took the payroll tax, FICA, we stuck it under the business tax, and so every worker in the country will get a tax cut, whether they pay an income tax or not. So a worker that makes $40,000 a year and is married and has 2 kids will not pay FICA. They'll have a $2,000 more in their check each year. And we think that that will help to unite both the working class and the business class and the owner class. And then let's have the argument, where's the money better spent? In Iowa or sent to Washington? You're sort of punished twice. You're punished once when they take your money, but you're punished again sometimes when they spend the money. I wrote a whole book called Government Bullies about how the government, through regulatory power, is harassing ordinary citizens. One of the things that we talked a lot about is how the government comes in and tells you how you can use your land. There was a guy named Robert Lucas down in southern Mississippi, and he was developing individual real estate lots, and he decided to improve the elevation by bringing in dirt. He, his daughter, and his 80-year-old partner were all given prison time. He was given 10 years in prison for conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act. You say, what does putting dirt on your own land have to do with the Clean Water Act? I'm still asking the same question. The thing is that we have some rules that are well-intentioned. The Clean Water Act says that you can't discharge pollutants into a navigable river. Well, I agree with that. You should be able to dump benzene in the Mississippi River or in the Great Lakes or the oceans. There should be some rules. But the thing is over time, as government grows and the executive branch or the president just keeps adding rules to it, what happens is they now define dirt as a pollutant and your backyard is a navigable stream. In fact, it's worse than that. They say if a bird could have ever been in a navigable stream and flown and landed on your property, that's a nexus. And so you are now connected to the waters of the United States, and the federal government can regulate you anywhere. And here's the thing, this is happening by regulatory fiat. What does that mean? The government's just doing it and Congress is never voting on it. So when people ask me, they say, what's the worst thing the president has done? It's not Obamacare, although that's pretty bad. It's not Dodd-Frank, the regulations of the bank, which is pretty bad, stifling your local economy. What it is that he's collapsed the separation of powers. Madison talked about having co-equal branches of government, where you would fit ambition of one, Congress, versus the ambition of the president, and they would each jealously guard their power. But in doing so, you would have checks and balances. In fact, one of the philosophers that our founders looked towards and Jefferson looked towards was Montesquieu. And he said that when the executive begins to legislate, then a form of tyranny will ensue. Well, I can tell you we're there. Because what's happening is that the most important laws I never vote on. I will never get a vote on. Remember we had a vote on cap and trade? Republicans were elected in 2010, or actually right before that, and it was voted down. And then what happened? They do it anyway. The greenhouse gases, all these rules that are being promulgated, I have no vote. The lowest level bureaucrat in Washington has more power than your senator or your congressman. And this is really disappointing, but it's how we're losing the grip on our country. So now we have the decision. You have the decision to make who will be your nominee. And the thing is I don't think all the nominees are going to do the same or have the same wherewithal to do anything. We've done this in the past. When we elected the first George Bush, our first experience with Bushes, when we elected the first Bush, he redefined wetlands to mean everything. So your farm's a wetland now. My backyard, if there are any leaves that are blackened on the bottom, is a wetland. If they can drill into the soil in my backyard and find water in the soil, not standing water, not a puddle, not a pool of water, not a lake, not a pond, but water dissolved in the dirt of my ground, they can say they've got a wetlands. We need to spend more time protecting the Great Lakes and less time in our backyard. I remember back when it was sort of Reagan versus Bush, and there were a lot of debates back then. One was over education, whether it should be centralized in Washington or whether it should be decentralized and kept local. When we had this debate, Ronald Reagan said, you know what, we don't need the Department of Education. They just created it under Jimmy Carter. He said, we don't want to centralize education, we want to keep it at home. This debate's still going on. Reagan won the first time around and the second time around, but eventually then we switched back to the Bushes, and the Bushes believe that there should be more centralization of education. Now it's Common Core. Once upon a time it was doubling the size of the Department of Education. You get to the second Bush we elected, and we actually doubled the size of the Department of Education. We added No Child Left Behind. Conservatives didn't like it, teachers didn't like it, because teachers said, how can we be judged as to whether or not we're a good teacher by someone who lives in Washington? And I agree with them. In fact, I think it could be a unifying principle where we bring teachers back and over to the Republican Party and say, look, we're for empowering teachers. We want you to be in charge with the parents, the local school board, but we don't want someone in Washington telling you what to do, developing the curriculum, or telling you, frankly, whether you're a good or bad teacher. If we want to win, though, we've got to be a bigger party. And the whole question is, do we dilute our values? Do we dilute what we stand for? Are we going to be for half as much, a glass half full? Or can we be for what we're for? Can we be boldly for what we're for and then still attract new people? And I think we can. What I've been telling people is we need to be the party of the entire Bill of Rights. We're great on the Second Amendment. I tell people of the 55 people running for president, 50 of them are probably gonna be good on the Second Amendment. But the thing is, we need to be good on the whole Bill of Rights. And so I stood for 10.5 hours to defend your right to be left alone, which is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says that the government can't come and take your records unless they specify who you are by name, unless they say what they're suspicious of, unless they go to an independent judge. See, this was so great about the Constitution, the way we were founded, is the checks and balances. Now, why do you say the policeman has to call the judge? Do you not trust your policeman? No, most of our policemen are good. But the reason we have the call is that the police in the hot pursuit might be angry or might be running towards someone's house they don't like. Or in the old days, there was a time when racial prejudice could have entered into what the police were doing. So they have to stop, catch the breath, call a judge on the phone. The judge is supposed to be dispassionate. Does it always work? No, but it's a good check and balance. Because there have been times in our history when we didn't do the right thing. Think of when we incarcerated the Japanese Americans, 100,000 of them for no reason at all. Think of what happened to African Americans in the South when they weren't treated fairly by the system, by government. So there's a lot of reasons why you want these checks and balances. And so what I spent 10.5 hours on the floor talking about was talking about why we need to have and why we should have this right to be left alone. Justice Brandeis wrote in a dissenting opinion, he said, the right to be left alone is the most cherished of rights. It's the right that civilized men and women find to be most prized, is this right to be left alone. And some will say, well, there's no right to privacy in the Constitution. Well, the thing is, there is. You just have to get through the rest of the amendments. If you get to the Ninth Amendment, the Ninth Amendment says those rights not listed are not to be disparaged. You do have a right to privacy. Our rights come from our Creator. They're naturally ours, and the government has no right to take them away. Even a majority of people can't take them away. Your rights are naturally derived, and they are yours. And so we have this debate, and some think, well, if you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. That's a sort of a far cry from innocence until proven guilty. And the thing is it doesn't have, privacy isn't about people who do stuff wrong. Privacy can be about people who are doing things right, but still don't want the government involved in their affairs. You could be an evangelical Christian. You could be somebody who teaches their kids at home. You could be somebody who worships in a different way than someone else, and the government needs to leave you alone. It's not about whether you've done something wrong, it's about whether or not the government should be involved, because once the government gets involved and decides to look at all of your affairs, where's it going to end? So we had this big battle, and I go back to the Bushes again. What did Jeb Bush say? He said the best thing that President Obama's done is collecting all your phone records. I think it's one of the worst things the president has done. And the thing is that people then say, oh, well, it's just boring old business records. Why would you care? It's just your phone records. 85% of the time they can tell from your phone records what your religion is. Nearly 100% of the time they can tell who your doctor is. From your doctor they can infer what diseases you have. They also say that your visa bill has no protection. In fact, if you read them closely and you listen to them closely, they'll say the Fourth Amendment does not apply to any of your records at all. And if that's true, that's a scary world we live in. Because if I have your visa bill, I can tell whether you smoke, whether you drink, what books you read. I can tell everything. We live in a world where almost all of our purchases are done, through records, through credit cards. Part of the concept of this was that a man or a woman's house is their castle. And so we wanted to protect your house from the government coming in without any kind of warrant or suspicion or a judge's permission. But your records are no longer in a castle, they're in a cloud. Our records are virtual. In fact, if the government came into your houses, they probably find almost nothing as far as paper records. But if they have your cell phone and can look at everything on your cell phone, or everything that is online about you, or everything the phone company has, or the credit card companies, it's an enormous amount of information that I don't think anybody should have. Now the other side will say, well, they're not looking at it. They're just collecting it, and then they're not looking at it. Maybe. But the thing is that, think about it this way. What we objected to with the British soldiers was, the soldiers were writing their warrants, no judge. There was no name on it, and they were indiscriminately going in any of the colonists' house to see if they paid their stamp tax. They were collecting their papers. Do you think the colonists would have been pacified with, oh, we're just collecting your papers, but we're not going to look at your papers? The thing is that it stretches credulity to think that that would happen. But this is a fight that's worth having, and it's a fight that separates us. I think also, though, we need to be for the entire Bill of Rights. So the Second Amendment, defending your right to bear arms, absolutely. First Amendment, your religious freedom, freedom of the press. The Fourth Amendment, your right to privacy. But also the Fifth and Sixth Amendment, which I call the Justice Amendments. These say that if you're accused of a crime, that you get due process. Or if the government wants to come and take your farm or take your property, certainly you get due process. We're supposed to have rare exceptions where the government can take your property through eminent domain. But you know what they did is they interpreted this. The Supreme Court's occasionally been wrong. They interpreted in Kelo versus New London that if you have a condo and a big business wants your land and will pay more in taxes and we get more in taxes to the business, then it's fine. We'll call your condo or your house blight, even if it's not, even if you don't think it's blight, and they take it from you and give it to a corporation. To my mind, that should never, ever happen. We've also allowed it to happen in smaller amounts. Civil asset forfeiture. This is where the government can stop you for an unsafe lane change and say, do you have any money? You say, well, I've got $1,000. I'm going to the dentist to get a tooth fixed. And they say, give it to me. And I'm not kidding you. You have to give it to them. And then they say, well, if you sign this piece of paper promising not to sue to get your money back, we'll give you half back right now. We'll negotiate on the side of the road or half your money back now if you promise not to sue to get the other back. But think about who gets affected. It's probably not a lot of people in this room, but it's people who are poor, don't have representation, live on cash because they can't get a credit card for one reason, but they're living, their life is just barely going on, and that's who they're taking the money from. Turns out to be disproportionately African Americans, Hispanic, poor whites, but the thing is people who can least able to absorb this. But the thing is if we become the party who says that's wrong and says that you have to be convicted of something before they take your money, in fact, I don't have a problem with it. If you're in sex trafficking and we convict you, take your millions and give them to the victims of this. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why civil asset forfeiture could be a good thing. But you should convict people and you should be innocent until proven guilty. This is a way we can be for what we're for the Bill of Rights, still be the party of balanced budgets, low taxes, less regulations, but also be the party that cares about those who are being mistreated by sort of a big government over-criminalization. The Sixth Amendment says you got a right to a trial by jury. And you would think, who could object to that? Well, a couple years ago, we passed something called indefinite detention. And with indefinite detention, an American citizen can be detained forever. So I'm having the debate with this other senator on the floor, and I hate to name names, but he was from Arizona. So this other Republican senator, we're having this debate, and I said, does this mean an American citizen could be detained and sent to Guantanamo Bay forever? And his response was, well, yeah, they're dangerous. It's like, kind of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not dangerous? Think about the times in our history where we got it wrong. Think about vigilante justice. Think about all the things that we don't represent as Americans. I'm reminded of Richard Jewell. Everybody said Richard Jewell's the Olympic bomber. He was convicted on TV. In fact, television finally had to pay millions of dollars because he wasn't the Olympic bomber, but everybody said he was. He fit the profile. He wore glasses. I see a couple of you out there. He was an introvert. He had a backpack. Well, to my mind, you still should get your day in court. That's not enough. But it turns out he was innocent. And when I ask people to imagine, people who are frightened and say, people don't look like me, that person's grandmother came from Lebanon or something, they're an Arab American, we need to be frightened of that person. Think about Richard Jewell, but also think about if Richard Jewell had been a black man in the South. If we make these jumps and these generalizations about people based on color of your skin or your religion or what you look like or who your parents are, that's not what America's about. So we need to be the people who stand up and say, yes, we're going to do everything to stop terrorism, but we're not gonna indiscriminately snatch people up and put them in jail. We are and should be the party of the Bill of Rights. I think we can win again. I think we can win again by being boldly for what we are for. What I would say to you is that this campaign is going gangbusters right now. We are ahead of Hillary Clinton in 5 states won by President Obama. We lead Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania, which hasn't been won by a Republican since 1988. And I think the reason is that we're polling ahead of her with independents. And the reason is because we're talking about different things. We're talking about how tax cuts aren't necessarily for rich people, but are a way to bring up our inner cities. A way to, how do you rejuvenate Detroit? Let's cut their taxes. Let's don't bring money from Iowa to Detroit. Let's just never take it from Detroit. Leave it in Detroit. So we lead Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Colorado, Iowa, and in New Hampshire. 5 states that were won by President Obama. How do you win? I think it's by being boldly for what we are for. Balanced budget, small government, the Constitution, but figuring out what part of our message actually appeals to young people, to people who haven't been listening to this. You know, I did the same speech on the Fourth Amendment privacy at Liberty University, Cherry Falls University, and at Berkeley. So the thing is the message can resonate with different audiences. We don't have to change what we stand for, but we do have to figure out how to take it to new people and bring them into our party. I'm convinced we can do it. It's going gangbusters. Remember that Iowa caucuses are not that big. If this room became committed and went out and each got 20 votes and you got them all to the polls, we win your area. That's what it takes. It really isn't that big. Not that many people committed enough to do it. I want to make our party bigger, better, and bolder. I hope you'll be a part of it. Thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you.